Hello, my name is Hannah and welcome back to my channel. This video is my next cruise video, which has a little bit of a backstory. Earlier in the year, we had sailed to Norway on the Queen Mary 2 at Easter time, which was freezing. And meanwhile, we have been trying to sell our flat. So we had made ourselves a little deal. If the flat hadn't sold by the summer, we would be going on another holiday, somewhere warmer. So here we are. Whilst we were on the Queen Mary 2, I became really intrigued about what it would be like to sail on Queen Anne, which is Cunard's most recent ship. So when the opportunity came to go on the Queen Anne to Lisbon and Vigo, we just had to take it. So let's get into it. We always stay in Southampton the night before, and we always end up with a bit of time to kill before we can get on board. So we have this little habit now of heading to the beach. And after that, it was time to head to the port, go through security, and then my favorite part, every single time. There's just something about walking up the gangway. You can see the ship and you can feel the anticipation building, and you know that in just a few steps, you're going to be seeing inside the ship for the first time, and I love that feeling. My first impression of Queen Anne was very modern, but unmistakably Cunard. Now, one thing that was a little different on this sailing was we had to do a proper in-person muster drill. Afterwards, we headed up to the upper decks to watch the sail away, and we watched Southampton getting smaller behind us as we headed down the Solent. I never get tired of this moment, and it feels like the holiday has officially started. Day 2 was our first full sea day, which is honestly one of my favorite things about cruising. We started the morning at a Christian fellowship meeting, which I will say starts far too early for a sea day, in my opinion. I didn't get any footage in the morning, which I'm slightly annoyed about, but we'll move on. Afternoon tea on Cunard ships are an event. I got there early, claimed my seat, and waited for it all to begin. The sandwiches, the cakes, and the proper tea. Now, the ladies opposite us, I'm not really sure why they came. They had zero tea, zero cakes, zero sandwiches, and they just sat on their phone the entire time. I'm not judging. Okay, I'm a little bit judging. In the evening, it was celebration night. So John is looking very smart in his suit, and we headed to one of the viewing bars. And I say viewing bar loosely because there were no tables, so we ended up tucked away at the back, like we'd been sent to the naughty table. Afterwards, we were wandering around on the lower levels of the atrium. Day 3 was the day we went to Vigo. Now, I have to be honest with you, I had a very specific idea of what Vigo was going to look like. The pictures on the Cunard website had me convinced that we were heading somewhere right on the coast, close to a rocky beach. And we were not. What I had actually been looking at were I think they're pronounced CS Islands, which are beautiful islands nearby, but not somewhere you can easily get to with limited port time. So recalibrated expectations it was. We started by heading up to the back of the ship for a good view before going ashore, which is always worth doing before you get off. Once we were off, we had a wander around the harbour and we got some clips of the Queen Anne from the water. She looks incredible from the outside, by the way. Now, I have a little habit of overpacking, and by habit, I mean consistent and well-documented problem. I had brought with me what I can only describe as the most enormous handbag known to humanity, and I had filled it completely. The bag was already a problem before we even started climbing. Just walking around the town, it was already pulling. So not my finest decision. John, bless him, very kindly helped me repack into a much smaller bag for the remaining days, the essentials only, and lesson very much learnt. So we started heading up towards what I am going to call the hill and the fort, because I don't want to butcher the pronunciations. And climbing got warm very quickly. The jumper came off fairly soon into the climb. What I really liked about this is it wasn't just climbing a hill for a view. There were actual ruins to explore on the way up and once we were at the top. It felt like a proper adventure rather than just a slog. And at the top, wow, the views across Vigo were gorgeous. And whilst we were up there, there was a classical guitarist playing. He wasn't trying to make himself the center of the attention. It was just a gentle in the background, very much setting the scene rather than performing. And it just added to the whole experience. We spent a good while up there just exploring and taking in the view. We took some quieter route through the town on the way back, which was really nice, but I'll just say, trust your instincts when you're in a new city. Vigo, like a lot of port towns, is known for pickpockets. And I had a bit of a moment where someone caught my attention in a way that just didn't feel right. So I put the camera away until we were back at the harbour. So once we were back on board, I had a bit of a wander around the ship to watch the sail away from Vigo. And honestly, I really liked Vigo. It wasn't what I expected, the rocky beach, no CS islands, but it was genuinely a lovely place with a great viewpoint and a bit of history. So day 4 was our first day in Lisbon, and we'd been told the night before roughly what time we'd be sailing in under the 25 Disembarkation bridge. So we set an alarm and dragged ourselves up to the highest deck to watch. Except we arrived earlier than expected. So it was a bit of a mad rush to get up there in time. And it was pouring with rain. I mean, the footage has more and more water droplets on the lens as time goes on. Thank goodness it was the Insta360 X4, which is waterproof. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten anything. It was gloomy and grey, and honestly, it was still spectacular. Coming in under that bridge into Lisbon, even in the rain, it was just a moment. I wish I had caught more of the shoreline on the approach, but we arrived early, so I missed most of that. Still worth every second of that early alarm though. After breakfast, we got some gorgeous shots of Lisbon from the back of the ship. The weather was still a bit miserable in the morning, so we had a lovely lazy morning on board, which honestly felt quite indulgent and very welcome. We actually had lunch in the main dining room, which when I was editing this footage, I thought it was the only time we've ever done that on all of our cruises. And then I remembered, no, we did that on the Queen Mary too, just once. But this time there were some local guests that came on board for lunch, and they had camera crews set up as well. They were all very professionally dressed, and it was all very intriguing. We never did find out what it was all for though. So once the weather improved in the afternoon, we headed out and we got some obligatory clips of the ship from the dock. She is really very beautiful. And then we did something I absolutely love, a little boat trip along the Lisbon coastline. So I got some footage of the coastline in the end. Now, I will say the boat was a bit old and a little bit rusty, and I'm not entirely sure it would have passed a British safety inspection. But we survived, the trip was brilliant, and the views of the city from the water were stunning. Sometimes I guess you have to just trust the rusty old boat. After the boat trip, we then headed into a town square right on the waterfront where we saw the famous yellow tram and a gorgeous old red one too. Lisbon is just such a beautiful city to walk around. So I had really wanted to go on the funicular whilst we were in Lisbon, but it's currently closed, or was when we went, for repairs after it had an accident earlier in the year, which means that in 2025 alone, I have been thwarted by 2 funiculars. Bergen, where it was so rainy and foggy that you literally couldn't even see the hill, and now Lisbon. Hopefully, I will get my funicular dreams achieved one day. So day 5 was our second day in Lisbon, and we were out exploring again. We started off walking to the Museum of St. Anthony before having a look around the museum itself. We then headed to another town square with some fountains, and it had the most incredible patterned floor. It reminded me of when we visited Alicante, that same style of beautiful mosaic pavement. Afterwards, we headed towards what I thought was going to be a free viewing point, and we were not. It turned out there was an entrance fee. So it wasn't expensive, and the ticket did include a drink, which was quite welcome after the walk in the heat. So I'll still call it a win. And I have to say, I'm really proud of one particular shot that I got at the top. We headed back to the ship, had dinner, and then I got a time lapse of us sailing out of Lisbon under the bridge at night, which was just as good as coming in, and maybe even better. Was another sea day, and we settled into that lovely cruise rhythm of having absolutely nowhere to be. We had gone to the fellowship meeting again in the morning, still too early for a sea day, but no footage from the morning again. So I expect it was fairly relaxed start and a lot of Sudoku. One of my favorite things to do on a sea day is just wandering around the ship on my own. There's something really peaceful about being outside on a ship with nothing particular to do. I take my Sudoku, find a spot, and just be. We also had lunch in the gastropub on board, which was a nice change. And one lovely thing about this trip was there was a particular family we'd met on the very first day from the fellowship meeting, and we just kept bumping into them on the ship, in the port, everywhere. It was a big group of them. There was about 10 or 11, and every time we saw them, it was just a really friendly little moment. So we finished the day at one of the bars listening to music and just enjoying a quiet evening. Day 7 was our last full day on board and was another sea day. We started at the fellowship meeting again, which ran quite long. So by the time we got out, breakfast was winding down. We didn't even manage to get coffee before it closed, which I will be honest, I was a bit grumpy about. John, being an absolute star, went and got me one from one of the coffee shops. So crisis averted. He headed back to the cabin for a bit of a rest, and I went for a wander. What we had started calling our anti-buffet laps, because if you know, you know. But I'm not sure this anti-buffet lap was particularly effective because I did end up with a poolside burger and a pudding from the buffet on the way. And I kind of regret nothing. John joined me a little bit later and he found a grand piano in one of the venues that wasn't currently being used. And John, being a music teacher and having studied jazz piano, having wanted to play one of the ship's pianos for a long time, he took the opportunity. I then secured us the best seats for afternoon tea, front and centre, which I was feeling very smug about. The procession came through, and unlike on the Queen Mary 2, where I completely missed it, this time I got it on film. There was also a duo performing, and the singer was amazing. People were also up and dancing, and the swivel chairs were a delight and were far more entertaining than they probably should have been. Just a perfect afternoon tea experience from start to finish. With it being the last full day, I wanted to get some proper footage of the ship's interior. The atrium, where the whole picture changes as you walk around it, the grandeur of the main dining room, and then our cabin. We always book an inside cabin because it's the most cost-effective way to cruise, and honestly, you're mostly just sleeping in there anyway. Inside cabins also tend to be more central to the ship, so you tend to feel less movement. And I genuinely loved this one. There was loads of storage, which as someone who, as we've already discussed, overpacks, it's very important to have plenty of storage. Also, the USB-C fast charging ports were something I'd read about beforehand and made sure I'd got the right cable for, but they were so handy. Such a small thing, but such a good feature of the room. The dressing gowns, oh my goodness, they were so fluffy and so cozy. The one thing I would change was the mirror lighting. It looks stunning with the backlit effect, especially when our cabin steward would leave it on in the evenings, but there was no front light to the mirror, so doing makeup was a bit of a challenge. Minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. And the bathroom, quite glamorous for a cruise cabin. But the best bit, the Penhaligon's toiletries. They use them across all Cunard ships, so I knew to expect them, but they are amazing, especially the hand cream. The smell is so good. And then John called me. There was a sunset, our only one of the whole trip. It was in the rain, again, so the water droplets were all over the lens, but I ran for it anyway, and I'm so glad that I did. A rainy, slightly blurry, completely beautiful sunset on our last evening at sea. We spent our last evening in one of the bars, and there's always a slightly bittersweet feeling on our final night. You know the holiday is nearly over and you're trying to hold on to it. We had dinner and I made sure to get a clip of the model ship in the atrium for the last shot of the night, feeling like a fitting full stop. Day 8 is Disembarkation day, and it's always too early and a little bit sad. If you know the drill, there's an early alarm and you shuffle off the ship with the rest of your luggage. Once we got to the car park, we took one last look back at the ship, one final shot of me in the passenger seat with the Queen Anne visible behind us through the back as we drove away. The perfect goodbye shot. So that was Queen Anne, Vigo and Lisbon. and I loved it. Vigo surprised me. It was not the rocky beach that I was expecting, but we did get a hill, a ruin, a classical guitarist, and views I was not prepared for. Lisbon was just as beautiful, even with no funicular. And the Queen Anne herself, modern but still Cunard. I'm really glad that we got the chance to be able to sail on Queen Anne. And as for the flat, still not sold, which means the holiday rule must still be in play, and we may or may not have booked another cruise. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!